Okay, welcome to session 3. We have been here sharing, but now I'm going to start the slideshow. Play from start. And you all can see this slideshow, correct? And Nina and Cheryl and Dana have said they may chime in. I may invite them, and they're fine with being recorded just to share to you all who have missed these. But this is Speak Soul to Soul, tending a loving flow between the living and the dead. And a lot of it is based on the essay that you have the link to that you could download. There's just a little bit of a following along part that I'm going to set up. And it does go through these points, but we'll have a little bit of conversation. It will be unique to hear from what this group has to say. So, calling in our beloveds. I've done this presentation before, sometimes with groups where there's no setup, like we're just beginning now. We fortunately have been sharing stories. But this does still apply to kind of keep in mind as we're going through. Whoops. So the invitation is to bring into your heart one of your beloveds in the beyond to be with us as we're going through this. And for us here, it can be who we just shared about in the circle. And for you listening on the recording, just take a moment to tune into that beloved and just bring them into your heart. Okay. This is for a group that is just starting fresh. Type the name in your name to the chat so we can see who's here, but we have been sharing already. Now bring into your hands or into your imagination a picture of the beloved doing something quintessentially them. Like if you want to close your eyes, we've been working this week on memory. Is there one of those memories that you kind of bring into your mind's eye as like almost like a photograph? Or maybe you literally have a photograph of your beloved that you love, that's showing them being quintessentially them. I ask you just to kind of bring that to mind and have it in your awareness as we go through this conversation. And there will be a point where there's a little suggestion or interactive part. So we welcome our beloveds in the beyond here to be with us as we talk about speaking soul to soul. So one of my points, why I do this, you don't need an intermediary, is one of the focus of this 4-part series. And the subtitle of this is The Strange Gift of the 5 of Swords, or the 5 of Birds, the air element. And I do believe that there are people who are able to more freely kind of let the information from our beloveds, our recently dead, come through. After my partner John died, it was really like maybe a few weeks after. I have a friend, she's not an official psychic. We were doing a tarot meditation, and afterwards she said, can I speak? Can I tell you something? And I said, sure. She said, I think John was sitting in between us. I said, oh, okay, great. And she said, he was wearing white robes and a rock necklace. And I went, well, in life he wore jeans and a baseball cap, but maybe you have a different dress code on the other side. And I just was like getting this nice sense. And then she said, he said this word, like in the movie, she said rosebud. And then I stopped, because my security password for everything was my cat that I had as a child, who was Taffy Apple Rosebud. And I was literally using it as my security password, at the time this happened. I've since changed it. John worked in security, so that was like a big thing for him. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting the password. And then there were a few other things of kind of messages coming through. And someone said to me, you should go see a psychic, like someone who really gets the invitation. So there was someone coming and I made the appointment and I arrived or I was talking to her on the phone, setting it up. And she's like, don't tell me anything. Don't tell me anything. Because I work with tarot, but I don't, like I say, I don't particularly work in a psychic way. So I'm always in dialogue with people. She said, don't tell me. So I'm like, okay. So I show up and she said, don't tell her. And so she starts talking and trying to kind of get things from me, but she said not to say much. So I'm not giving her that much. I mean, I'm just like, okay with this. And then she starts to say, he's having a problem communicating with you. He's having some, and the idea, what goes in my head, this is only like 2 months after he's died. It's like, oh no, something is wrong. So it's just playing into my fears about John and things not working. And the whole thing does not go well. And she keeps trying, she comes to get like help. And then she says a whole string of things that just don't make any sense. And I just leave so dispirited because it's, feeding into I should have done something to help. So the next morning, I'm feeling terrible. And I go to my tarot cards and I say help. And what appears is the 5 of birds. This image. And this is an image really of the birds, the 5 of birds. They're kind of the vultures coming and eating the flesh from the body. But this is the Shining Tribe, Rachel Pollack's deck. And, it's the idea of the shaman. The flesh falls away so the light can emerge. So it is an intense card, not warm and fuzzy, but I turned it over and I looked at it and I said, yes, this is what is happening to me. I'm having this intense experience. I'm being eaten away by grief. And this is what happened to John. Like his body is dismembered. And so because I had that experience, I'm like, okay, I have to keep working with the tarot cards, to this tool that I have, these friends that I had, like the cards were like friends, and working with the Shining Tribe. This deck just spoke to me. I'm like, okay, I don't need an intermediary. I may not get like a XYZ message, but I can work with the cards and find my way to remake my relationship with John in this different form. So, and that's my motivation for sharing, this way of Speak Soul to Soul. It's not, about mediumship. I do believe, and like, as I said, this friend who's given me these wonderful messages subsequently, like it's for real. But there's also something of just us finding our own way to communicate is something that I'm offering. This is the piece that I'm offering. So in Speak Soul to Soul, I tell stories. You can read the stories that are there. And then I end with some tips of how to do things. And the suggestions here are more about having a mindset or a heart set, as I say, to cultivate and support connection with the beloved dead. They're not specific to any tradition, but inspired by wide reading and lots of practices and just like teachers I've worked with in most of the tarot world. So this is the things woven together. I stand in a long line of tradition. And so this first tip here is be aware of the small, the odd, the weird, and the wild all around you. This is as we walk through our everyday life, life goes so fast, but when we kind of slow down a little and look at something like odd that we might rush by, but then we're like, oh wait, I'm gonna pause, I'm gonna look at the moonlight. I'm gonna look at the 2 birds flying over the 2 flowers in, the sun in the sky reflected in the pond, and go, that's a lot of 2s. What is that saying to me? Is that about partnership? Is that those little things, when we pause and give them attention, they can remind us, they can open up that way to have the continued connection. So that is my first invitation. And I don't know if anyone here has a story or something to share, you know, prompted by this first point. Feel free to just chime in if anything comes to mind.
Well, whenever I see a monarch butterfly, I always think of my mother, because she said to me, we used to have a lot of monarchs where we lived. And she said, oh, that's Papa, because he always said, you know, when he passes, he's going to take care of me and watch over me. So say hi to Papa. So whenever we saw a monarch, you know, we would wave to Papa and say, hi, Papa. So now it makes me think of both of them in a really lovely light, you know, in a loving way.
Wonderful. I love too how that, you know, is passed down.
Yeah.
To generations. We live in a world where a lot of our traditions are kind of seem broken, or we come from other countries. Are things carried on, and they're carried on in these stories, and maybe things that seem small, but are very powerful. It's beautiful.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, from the small, I'm going to keep going. Let your imagination lead. This is an invitation to step aside from the rational mind. And because the rational mind will say, well, so what? It's a butterfly, there are butterflies all over, that doesn't mean anything, blah, blah, blah. But no, and that happens, right? Depending on how, you know, either like attuned we are, or, you know, how much we're getting that message, you know, like the first thing that might come up for me, it's like doubt comes up. And so I have to go like, oh, okay, wait. I'm just going to let those ideas go aside. Because, you know, I live in the rational world. I need that help sometimes, but I'm going to put that aside for here and go with the imagination and let it guide me and let myself muse, you know, why is this catching my attention? How could this be significant? Could this be a message? And we who use tarot or other oracles, work with symbols, you know, we have, it's a gift of being able to be like, okay, the monarch butterfly, I'm seeing a butterfly, but what is that a symbol of? Well, of course, the butterfly, the regeneration, the flying in the air, being, you know, a conduit between the worlds, like, oh, okay, this could be the message. And you let those stream of possibilities come in, and you hold them and let them delight you. Like, and when in that delight, that's, you know, I've often, like, I look at the moon, you know, like shortly after John died, you know, or even now, you know, I would look at the moon and I would just feel like, okay, this is the connection. And it just made me happy, you know, to the beautiful light of the moon, that I felt this. And that happiness then, like, that's kind of the rope or the weaving that keeps the connection. It's a piece that I found. And if anyone has any other imagination stories, happy to hear them. But as you can see with the ... it means we're also going to the next part. Oh, and maybe I have opened that, and let your heart receive. Like the idea of the imagination opens you up, that delight you feel, and then your heart is open to receive. And that open heart is, it's not a total prerequisite, but the open heart does help us have that flow to the places on the other side, our beloveds, and their open hearts and the gifts they want to send, whether it's their love or, maybe they're making an apology or whatever they need. Also, when your heart is what's protecting you, or that's creating the connection, when the heart is creating the connection, I think, or it's been my experience, that also then it's a way, a form of protection, because say your beloved on the other side is going through some healing, some things that are, challenging, five of birds kind of work, that it's not yours to connect with at that time, then, maybe that's the heart energy will just keep you centered in the heart, and you won't have to be connected to things that are difficult, that are not yours to deal with, is my thought. Oh, another piece about and let your heart receive is just kind of remembering you're kind of opening up, you're the delight, you're receiving, you're sending. Each one of us maybe have a way of like, we're more we like being the sender, we like, giving the love, giving the attention, or we're like receiving. And to find a way to balance. Today is the full moon, which in Libra, but it's connected to the Justice card, which is a card of balance. So you want to remember to let it come from both directions. And I learned that because this was part of my grief. I was just very busy I was very busy with my activities, my prayers, my doing the work, my sending the love. I was really working hard on that. And I actually worked with someone who was doing Reiki, and she said, have you received John's love? It's like, oh, I didn't even really think about that. And I went, actually, that day I got really angry. I was angry. I was angry at him for dying, and like things we were in the middle of. And I went home. I screamed in the car. I was screaming coming home. I was angry. Came home, I ripped up some things, and that was like a breakdown that then really allowed me to receive his love, like, kind of cleansing, cathartic, telling the truth. Before I'd been like, holding back things. But now telling the truth, but the heart opening happened, and the flow happened two ways. So that's a heart story for me. Any other heart thoughts? All right, now I'm moving on here, and I think we definitely have some thoughts on these. So yes, this next one is find a talisman or two or three, or really as many as you want. And these are everyday objects that kind of prompt your memory. And dimes is one that comes up. Like years ago, someone told me that her mother would leave dimes around, her mother who had died. And there was a time, I might be like one of the last generation here to remember of, like, we used a dime to make a telephone call. We went to the payphone, we put the dime in. So that was like, the conduit for communication. So something like that shows up. Pennies, people talk about pennies. Personal objects of the person, that might show up in another way. Anyone else have thought, like, everyday objects that remind you of your beloved, like they pop up in the physical world?
My dad used to have a lighter, a Bic lighter, and he would always flick it, like play with the lid. I don't know if you remember those silver lighter. Yeah. And he always bought flint, to put in it, because you had to refill the flint and put lighter fluid in it too. And so I still have a flint pack of his. So that makes me think about him and smile.
I love that it's light, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that.
Flashing up the light.
Exactly.
Cheryl, you have something?
I have many talismans that remind me of my mom. She was absolutely a brilliant woman, and especially for her time, she accomplished so much. This was during the 60s through the 90s, when uh, the work she was doing in the field of high-level science education was very male-dominated. She also became a private single-engine plane pilot, which was not that many women accomplished that. So I have, and I have many objects. She was fond of stones. She always gave me crystals and stones, um, and even though she was a scientist, she also believed in the unseen. And so she gifted me with my first tarot deck when I was 17. And anyway, so I have stones and little bits of jewelry, and just quite a number of things that always remind me of her. And whenever I see them, I just always have this warm little feeling like she's right there with a hug. I can actually physically feel her.
Wonderful. I have this necklace that John gave me. I think maybe the first birthday we were together, which I've always loved. But then after he died, I wore it all the time. And people noticed it more or remarked on it more than they had, so like whenever anyone remarks on it, I'm like, yeah, that's my life part. I'm like, well, it's like a prompt, a reminder, a little energy thing. All right, so that's objects. It can also be unusual occurrences, strange happenings with lights. A lot of people talk about this if you read different books, the idea of playing with lights. I had strange things happen with the phone that was John's, that I used as a camera. I also had a unique thing, I think. John had long hair, I had long hair, and our bathtub always was getting plugged up, and he would get the snake out, and it was kind of one of his jobs. He would fix it. And, it was getting stopped up like right before he was spending time in Montana, so he wasn't here, so he was away. And, I was waiting for him to come home to kind of unplug the drain because it was starting to fill up, and he didn't come home. And then this was like, and I was like not very functional and I couldn't deal with the drain. Like one day I tried to get out the snake and I couldn't figure things out. I just gave up, and it was like getting, like the water's up to my calves practically. And I had a housemate too. And one morning I'm taking a shower and I'm like, what happened to the water just drained? Like the water just, I couldn't figure it out. And I went to the housemate, did you fix the drain? And she's like, no, I didn't. So I put on Facebook, I'm like, did the dead concern themselves with plumbing? I'd like to think they had more important things to do. And I said, but this happened. And, he always did this. And I said, I don't know if it's a supernatural intervention, but it reminded me of the way John showed care. Like he was repairing things, and like it's like a metaphor for the way he was in the world. But my drain has like never plugged up again. Practically, like every once in a while I have to just do a little like with a plunger, but it just is a strange, weird thing. The drain, I don't know. So, and it makes me think of him, and it's the oddest kind of thing. So people, maybe we each have our odd occurrence, and maybe it just seems like an odd occurrence, or it's not, it doesn't seem so sacred, but you never know. You never know what is that touch of presence.
I'm going to share something with you. I actually haven't had my mom interfere in anything physically, except about a year after she passed away. No, she passed away in March of 95. And in November of 95, we went down and intended as a family to have Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I'm gonna have to start describing things. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. My mom and dad were down in Palmdale. My brother was in the area. My sister was in Los Angeles. And my parents had always hosted Thanksgiving dinner, and we had always brought everything there. So Dad decided that we should keep on with the family tradition, and so we made our plans. Well, during this time, my dad, who was distraught, he and my mom had been married just shy of 50 years, and Dad had never lived alone in his entire life. He'd gone from home to the Navy, where you live in crowds on ships. And then as soon as he got out of the Navy, he was immediately married. So he had never lived, so he was very vulnerable. And so, and he was like a little lost boy, because my mom did, she just did everything. So he got involved with a woman, a young girl with a child, who was just there for his money, whatever she could get off of him. And she was living there, apparently, although she was, according to my dad, she was just visiting and he was her daughter, but we all knew it was a really, really weird arrangement. So my sister and I, my husband and I were the first to arrive at the house for Thanksgiving, and we're greeted by this young girl who invites me into her home as if it's hers. Well, you can imagine my hackles went up. And I asked my dad, I said, are you married? What's going on here? Oh, no, she's just visiting for the holidays. Okay. So my husband and I got our stuff settled in the guest room, which used to be my mom's sleeping room. My mom and dad couldn't sleep in the same room because they both had horrible snoring and they kept each other awake. So we went to my mom's sleeping room and put everything away, and the room felt good to me, really felt good to me, and went on through the day. And later on in the evening, I noticed that some of my mom's collection of Indian items, pottery and things that had been displayed in the living room had been rearranged from their normal situation. I thought, well, that's interesting. And I just observed. And that night when we went to bed, 3 times during the night, somebody rapped on the door frame of the headboard of the bed. I mean, it was bang, 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 woke me up. And the bedroom door, which we had closed, was standing wide open. I stood up, I went outside in the hallway, I didn't see anything. And the next morning, I mean, I didn't hear anything else. Mom didn't talk to me. Just 3 times I got woken up by this banging on my headboard. Door flung open, went down, and in the morning, and all of the Indian ceramics, the little Native American bowls had been rearranged to the place that I remembered my mom having put them. So she was really upset about this other lady being in her house, messing with her stuff. I told my dad, I said, I don't think Mom likes this person. So we had to have a little chat about what his intentions with her really were. So that was my one and only poltergeist experience with Mom. And it had to be her. And she was absolutely adamant about not liking having this other person in her house, and she wanted me to do something about it.
Wow. And something you said made like that the woman didn't have good intentions, so your mom was still kind of protecting your father, maybe. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, Cheryl. You're muted. I don't know why.
Oh, I'm sure she was very aware that he was very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah, they'd stick around to protect us if needed is. Resonates with me, and I've heard other people say that too. Special encounters with creatures. We were talking about monarch butterflies. Last week we were talking about birds. Birds were up last week. it's amazing what happens with creatures. And, I've thought that it's not like the creatures are possessed or do something. It's just, I don't know, maybe they make themselves available. Who know what wavelengths exactly they're working on. And then finally, we have tarot and oracle cards, which coming out of the tarot community resonate with me. And this can work in a couple of different ways. Like the five of birds that showed up, like, okay, when that card comes up, that now has this, special meaning for me. And actually the air suit in that deck, the bird suit in that deck has a lot of resonance, a lot of different cards that resonate with me. The cards that kind of come up and give us messages or comfort close to the death can have particular meaning. And then we can create our own oracle card. I think that's what I'm gonna just talk a little bit about next. This won't be a surprising idea. So this is a picture of John that is kind of quintessentially being John, kind of looking by the water in nature. And you remember in the beginning, I invited everyone to bring to mind, either just in your memory or an actual physical photo of your person being quintessentially who they are. And what happened with this image was, I'm part of Massachusetts Tarot Society, and we were making a collaborative deck. Everyone was participating. Everyone was kind of collaging cards. That had been our way we thought we were going to make all the cards. And we were getting toward the end, and we had maybe 10 or so cards to make. And the one we didn't have one was for the Knight of Cups. And I drove away, and it just came to me. Like, I remembered this picture. I had taken this picture. I had found this picture after he died. It was on my wall. And I was like, oh, John is the Knight of Cups. And so I called to Jill, who's our coordinator. I'm like, do you think it would be okay? And she's like, yes, of course. So John became a tarot card, the Knight of Cups in the Mass Tarot deck. And I take that card with me out in nature and wisdom wandering. And now whenever the Knight of Cups comes up in any deck, it has a layer of meaning of me being John. I also think anytime a person card comes up, it's us too. So it's not always John, but there's a layer of always, or an invitation. And it always makes me smile. So I invite you just to think for a moment of your person, that image that they had, that being quintessentially them. And if you work with the tarot, maybe think of one of those court cards or people cards that they might be. If you work with oracles, and there's like, what are they? Generosity. Oracle cards often they have like qualities, so you might think of your person. So just take us here live, maybe just close your eyes, take a moment, and you can let something surface. And if you're following up, listening to the recording, take your time and find that connection. And you could actually make a card, like, give it a title, put it on a backing, photocopy it, make it card sized. You could do that. And or just whenever if you work with the tarot, you work with the oracle, when that comes up, let that be the invitation to kind of think about and connect with your person. And I welcome any comments from you on live, but don't feel like you have to share. So that's been very fruitful for me. And I always carry this Knight of Cups card with me. Like, I have a little notebook that I bring with me wherever. I always have it with me. So John can pop out at any time. All right. The next little tip, this is tip. spend time by yourself. I mean, spending time by ourselves, spending time by myself has become really then that opening for spending time with John. And you need it's stepping away from other people, as being a little bit in tarot language, being a little bit the hermit, you know, going off by yourself, but it lets you commune with the greater than, it lets you commune with your beloveds in the beyond. But one thing to say, and maybe, you know, this is maybe more when you're earlier in your grief, but be careful not to spend all your time by yourself and like cut yourself off from the living, because that can be, I was going to say a dangerous part of grief, just like a difficult part of grief. It's like when we lose our connections to the people around us. And, you know, sometimes there is a healing part that needs to happen and you go through that. But you don't have to remove yourself from the world to be with your beloved in the beyond. You know, you have to balance being with the living and the dead would be. I mean, I love to spend, I am an introvert. Hermit is my life card. I have always liked to be with myself, by myself. So that's kind of somewhat easy for me. You know, people who are more extroverted, it would be a different kind of challenge. But you know, when we're by ourselves, it opens the door for us not being alone, being with our beloveds in the beyond. And any comments on that, feel free to chime in. I'm going to move along here to receive what you've been sent. I mean, none of these are like rocket science or like a difficult process, or there's really like the heart set, the mindset, the awareness. And what we receive will vary. You know, sometimes I have these kind of amazing alignments and synchronicities and in the essay, there are some stories like that. And you know, it's so clear. And sometimes it's like, well, not that much happens, but I'm out in nature. And then sometimes upon reflection of that, like, oh, there was an insight I had, or maybe a dream comes later. So you just kind of take in what you're receiving, the fullness of it, and whatever it is, whether it's you're getting things very consciously or unconsciously, kind of be with whatever the gift is. And that can kind of, the receptivity lets it build and come together in different ways. All right. I welcome any thoughts on that. But I think that's my last point. Okay, that's my last tip. But this is like our time, our spending time trying to communicate with our beloveds in the beyond, working with our talismans, with memory, just opening up our heart. This is a beautiful line from a poem, Ilse Kunitz, who she wrote these poems as she was dying. She knew she was dying, and she's writing them to her husband who she's leaving. And this is a line that just like captured my heart. I'll always be watching you go. You'll always be headed toward me. Like, we don't touch in the same way with our beloveds in the beyond, but there is that relationship, the watching and the moving toward, the moving away. We are moving in tandem in a certain way. So I hope as you go forward and try and play with these techniques or work with oracles during the week, that your beloveds, you are feeling that watching, you're feeling that like heading toward, moving toward, even when there's not that physical touch. So that is the last slide. And just as I say, the essay is up there, soulpathsanctuary.com/library, if you don't have it yet. And I've done this presentation before, that we're doing Listening for the Beloved Dead, obviously, in the spring. And in the fall, we write love letters to the dead. And it's a little bit of the balance of at the fall equinox, we're writing, we're communicating, we're sending our communications. And in the spring, we're listening, we're turning toward. And of course, you know, it happens. It's not in the fall, you might receive communications and you're listening, you're sending messages, but so like, you know, that equinox is balance. And here we are, it's the full moon day of Libra in balance. So that is the presentation with some tips, and I thank those gathered for sharing their wisdom. And the invitation this week is to just open yourself up, let your imagination guide you. If you have some oracle cards, maybe work with them, maybe carry them around with you. If you want to, you could create a oracle tarot card of your beloved in the beyond. Just do those things and open up to the patterns, the synchronicities. We've been building from just like heart, just being in the heart, being with the open heart, to kind of more actively working with memory and having that raise our awareness. And now we're gonna open up in the week to come to kind of open up to synchronicities and the patterns of things. You know, I said that in a very neat, tidy way, you know, of course, are working with that and coming to it over time. You know, so many of us have been doing this for many, many years. So just take this week as a experiment, a wisdom wander through the week, and invite your beloveds to be with you. And I hope that that goes well. And I am now, I'm going to stop the video, and we will see you next week for our final session in this series.
Okay, is it okay if we have some talking now that the video is off?
Yes, and I'm going to stop the share. There we go.
Okay, I've got just a few minutes before I have to go to a family call. What I wanted to share with is over the years, the way I choose to remember my mom has shifted.
Mm.
When she first died, it was about holding on to her things.
Mm.
And then I noticed over the years that almost God, it was almost, well, it was the lost child and the teddy bear sort of feeling. And I don't know how to explain this other than to explain that, you know, sometimes when you're a kid and life is trouble, there's a favorite aunt or a stuffed animal or something that you can physically hold on to that helps to settle you down and make you feel safe again, and not lost and alone. And now that the time has changed, I've been sending my mom's things away to her grandkids, saying, you know, this was mom's. I know you always enjoyed it. Enjoy it now, because you don't, you know, who knows? I could live to be 90, and you'd never. So make use of it now. And I also noticed that things in nature. Mom was science. We were in nature. There wasn't a single one of our vacations that didn't involve camping and national parks and being outside. And it's very interesting because while we've been talking, I drew 3 oracle cards, asking if my mom had anything to tell me about it. And the 2 things that came up were sacred sounds. This is from the Crystal Ally deck, and the wind. And she always used to tell us when we were out in the woods, sit down, be quiet for at least 15 minutes. Because when humans go crashing into a space in nature, the animals are like freaked out. But give them about 15 minutes and the birds will come back and they'll start, just be quiet. And they assume, then they realize you're not there to harm them. So I used to hear songs in the wind. I would hear the drone of the insects, but they didn't just go, it was like, it was music. And mom used to always tell